The Thanksgiving that changed everything. A family's betrayal. Thanksgiving had always been a holiday I looked forward to most. The anticipation built up every year. And it wasn't just about the food, even though that was a big part of it. It was about the tradition, the sense of home and belonging that filled the air. The smell of turkey roasting, the mashed potatoes, the pies. It wasn't just a meal. It was the moment when the house was filled with laughter, when everyone came together to celebrate something simple but meaningful. My mom would always host the dinner. And every year, without fail, she would make sure the table was set and ready for everyone. There was always chaos, especially with the kids running around, trying to find a spot at the table or steal a few extra rolls before they were served. But there was a warmth in all of it, the hustle, the clinking of silverware, the casual banter. Growing up, it was more than just about sitting down and eating a big meal. It was about what that moment symbolized. Thanksgiving was a celebration of family, of being together, and most of all, of feeling loved. My family's holiday rituals made me feel connected. It was one of the few times in the year that we could all be in one place, gathered around the table, enjoying each other's company. As a child, I looked forward to it with a sense of excitement, eagerly anticipating the comfort of that familiar environment. It was the one time each year I felt truly seen and heard, as if everything else, the busyness of life, the tension, and the everyday struggles, faded into the background. Thanksgiving was my favorite holiday because, for one day, everything seemed perfect, everyone was happy, and nothing else mattered. But this year, as Thanksgiving approached, there was something different in the air. Maybe it was the mounting stress from work. Or maybe it was the realization that the dynamics in my family were shifting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this year's celebration wouldn't live up to the ones I had grown up with. Still, I didn't realize how much I was clinging to that tradition until the morning of Thanksgiving. The excitement I normally felt was replaced by a quiet anticipation. I rushed through my errands, wanting to get everything done and then head to my parents' house. I figured I'd arrive at 4:00 p.m., allowing some time for the food to settle, but also not too early to miss anything. As I finished my tasks and checked the clock, it was 3:45 p.m. perfect timing. I was almost giddy. This was the Thanksgiving I had been waiting for, and everything felt like it would be perfect again. Or so I thought. As I drove toward my parents' house, memories from last year's Thanksgiving flooded my mind. I smiled, remembering the laughter and the way we all joked and teased each other, feeling comfortable and safe in each other's company. But as I turned down the street, I felt a small knot in my stomach that I couldn't explain. It didn't make sense, everything was supposed to be the same. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was just the stress from work creeping in, making me overthink things. So, I pushed it aside, trying to focus on the excitement of the day. I pulled into the driveway and immediately noticed something odd. The house looked quiet, almost too quiet. There were no cars parked out front. Normally, people would be arriving early, getting everything set up, and the driveway would be filled with cars. I stood for a moment, confused. Why was it so quiet? I walked up to the front door, thinking maybe I was just early or they were still finishing up. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time. Still, no answer. My heart started to race. Something was wrong, and I couldn't figure out what. I pulled out my phone, ready to text my mom and ask where everyone was. But before I could send the message, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "We thought you'd be late." I paused, staring at the message, trying to make sense of what she was saying. My mind went blank. And just as I tried to process it, another message came through. This time from my sister. We couldn't keep waiting. My stomach dropped. It didn't make sense. Thanksgiving had always been about family. We always waited for everyone to arrive before we sat down to eat. My family knew how much I cherished that tradition. The meal wasn't just about food, it was about being together. So why had they gone ahead without me? Why hadn't anyone called to check if I was okay or running late? The messages, the lack of concern, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My family had just moved on without me. I opened the door to step inside, expecting the usual hustle and bustle. But what I was met with was silence. The house was eerily quiet. There, on the table, was a half-eaten turkey, a few scattered side dishes, and some plates. It was clear they had already eaten. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the remnants of what should have been our meal. I felt a deep, bitter sting in my chest. This wasn't just about the food. It wasn't even about missing the meal itself. It was the realization that I had been excluded from something I had always held so dear. My family had moved on without me, without a second thought. Without even making sure I was okay. The hurt was overwhelming. But I refused to let it show. I turned and walked out, without a word, the silence between us growing louder with each step I took. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was in a daze. My hands gripped the door handle tightly, my fingers trembling from the shock of what had just happened. How could they do this to me? How could they just leave me out? I couldn't understand it. My mind raced, replaying the moment over and over again. I wanted to scream, to yell, to make them understand how hurt I was, but nothing came out. I felt numb. The only thing I could do was drive away. As I sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel, I sent a final text to my mom. I guess I'll just find something else to do. I didn't know where I was going. But I needed to get away. I needed to clear my head. I drove aimlessly for a while, not knowing what to do, just needing to escape. I ended up at a quiet park, parked near a bench, trying to gather my thoughts. The cold air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. I wasn't focused on the world around me, I was focused on the hollow ache in my chest. Thanksgiving, a holiday I had always cherished, had turned into a reminder of how invisible I had become in my own family. My phone buzzed again. It was a call from my mom. I didn't pick up. Part of me wanted to hear her out, wanted to know why they had gone ahead with the meal without me. But another part of me was too angry. I couldn't trust myself to talk to her without saying something I'd regret. A few minutes later, my sister texted. "Mom's really upset. Please come back." I stared at the message, seething with frustration. Upset? After everything they'd done, after how easily they had moved on without me, she was upset? My hands clenched around my phone. I felt every bit of the frustration bubbling up inside me. I had every right to be upset. But instead of responding, I hit block on both my mom and my sister's numbers. I didn't want to hear anything from them, not yet. I needed space. I needed to take control of the situation, to stop letting them make me feel small. I sat there in the park for what felt like hours. But the more I sat with my thoughts, the clearer things became. This moment, this Thanksgiving, had been a turning point. I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, trying to earn their approval, trying to fit into a family that never truly saw me. But I was done. I couldn't keep doing this anymore. They had made it clear that they didn't value me. So why was I still trying to make them care? The days that followed were filled with confusion and reflection. I thought about all the times I had put my family's needs before my own. All the sacrifices I had made, the love I had given, and how none of it had ever been enough. The silence between us stretched on, and it hurt. It hurt in a way I couldn't explain, but I knew deep down that it was time to let go. They had treated me like an afterthought for too long, and I was no longer willing to be their second choice. I had spent so much time waiting for them to realize how much I mattered. But they hadn't. I kept checking my phone, hoping for some sign that they understood what they had done, that they realized how much they had hurt me. But nothing came. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. It was almost as if they had moved on from me entirely. And in a way, I had to let go too. I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't there. I couldn't keep waiting for a family that didn't know how to appreciate me. The truth was clear. If I wanted to heal, I had to stop looking to them for validation. I had to build my own life, one that wasn't dependent on their approval or love. And that meant letting go of the idea of them as a source of happiness or fulfillment. I had to accept that, for better or for worse, I was the only one who could decide my worth. A week later, my mom reached out again. She asked to meet in person, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Had they realized their mistake? Was this just another attempt to smooth things over? I wasn't sure. But I agreed to meet her. When I arrived, I saw her sitting at a small cafe, her face tired, like she hadn't slept in days. I walked over and sat down. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, her hands folded on the table. Her expression was a mixture of guilt and apprehension. "I know you're upset," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm sorry for what happened on Thanksgiving. We shouldn't have started without you. We were worried you wouldn't come, and the food was getting cold." I listened, but part of me felt detached, like her words were just a form of damage control. They had already moved on from me, why hadn't they waited? Her apology felt like an excuse, not an explanation. She was trying to make it seem like it was all a misunderstanding. But I knew better. If they really cared, they would have waited. They would have checked in, made sure I was okay. It wasn't about the meal, it was about how easily they had let me slip through the cracks. She continued, but I couldn't focus on her words anymore. Then my sister texted me. "Please don't make